Thanks again to all of our conference sponsors, specifically by name, our sustaining level sponsors, the Walton Family Foundation and Pitkin County Healthy Rivers. Our headwaters level sponsor is CDPHE. Our river level sponsors are Northern Water and Cocoa. And then you can see our stream level sponsors there. And our scholarship level sponsors, which probably multiple of you here benefited from that. So this activity is substituting for the poster social. Pretty cool if you attended that last year. Thanks to those who answered our survey about the unusual conference format this year, many people highlighted that they appreciate the networking that comes from this conference. So while you were able to ask questions to speakers today, we want attendees to be able to talk to each other too. So let's talk about how this thing's going to work. First, we're going to show you a still image that should drum up some imagination. Then we're going to break out into rooms to talk to each other with an activity called I Notice, This Reminds Me Of, and I Wonder. Then we'll come back together to get the full feature. And next we'll have a breakout room with some crucial questions based on that full feature. Some expectations for this workshop and activity is to participate, but also let others speak besides yourself. Please stay muted when the videos are airing and mute when you are not speaking. Also, please have your camera on. We probably have students, professionals, state entities, and others represented in this group. It's an opportunity to speak with each other and learn from each other. And potentially, we're going to hear some differing opinions. So keep in mind that word choice and phrasing and attitude can be the difference in creating dialogue and building connections versus a cancel culture, which basically means if you don't share my belief, then I can't recognize your point of view. So while you chew on those expectations for our room, I would like you to find a piece of paper and something to write with, or you can do this on your phone, or you can keep mental notes if you don't feel like being artsy. But this is the thing that I've created. So we want 6 empty squares. Along the side is, I notice, this reminds me of, I wonder. Those are your 3 down the side.
Mallory, can you say them again?
I notice, this reminds me of, I wonder. You're welcome. Along the top, you're going to have 2 examples, silo busting and ATMs. Six empty squares. If you're having trouble seeing the screen share or me, go into your view options and say side by side, and then you can drag that bar from one side to the other to make things bigger or smaller. Now that our papers are created to do this first part of the activity, we'll go into a little bit more about what we mean with these questions. So Sammy has pulled up a visual for you here, and it's super small on my screen. You can look at that visual to see what we're talking about. Okay. I notice, be specific, use words, pictures, or numbers for what you notice about these still images we're going to show you. I wonder, there's some sentence starters for you. Who, what, where, when, how, why. And it reminds me of, other things you've learned or seen, felt, experienced. This reminds me of. Okay, we've got our papers ready. Let's start with our first image. Get to where you can see this image. You might have to drag that bar to one side or the other. Here's your still image. Start filling out your worksheet under silo busting with I notice, this reminds me of, I wonder. Here's a bit of time for that. You've got about 10 more seconds for that. Okay. You've had some time to fill out your boxes for this first still image. We will now split you up to discuss with each other for 5 minutes. And we will bring you back with a 15-second warning to show you the video in its entirety. Get ready to be broken out into breakout rooms and talk to each other. Welcome back, welcome back. I hope you got to speak to some cool new personalities in your room. And as we've brought you back, I'm sure we had some awesome dialogue based around that still slide. Let's take 5 minutes to share out. So if you have something to say about what was gained from your discussion, please collect your thoughts and share them concisely here. You can just unmute.
I can go. One of the things that we talked about is how siloing often happens. You know, one way that siloing might happen. So we kind of merged beyond just what we noticed and everything, and talking about how we appreciate that this conference doesn't silo off technical stuff or engineering versus geomorphology versus ecology. It brings in a lot of different perspectives, practitioners, planners, funders, all of that. Talked a little bit about some of the ways we saw that happen already today.
Fantastic. Do you want to go on with that thought? What are some of those ways?
Multidisciplinary projects. People we heard from practitioners. We heard from people in the business world. We heard from lawyers, from city personnel, from federal government, state government. Such a cool wide range.
Thank you, Scott Griebling. Who's next? Let's share out.
Well, I'll say the one thing I wondered about is the COVID-19 pandemic causing us to break down silos or to retrench in our silos? And I think different organizations are experiencing different things perhaps.
Thank you, Steve Mailers. Another idea.
Well, I noticed how really powerful and effective caricatures can be. I mean, farmers in overalls is about the last thing that you want to use, you know, to refer to agriculture, but man, it gets the point across. And I also thought it was interesting. I don't know, really captured the differences in personalities and work habits. And, you know, to Steve's point, talking about how, you know, sheltering at home or isolating. My son is a creative, and he's an animator. And he told me at the beginning of this, he said, I isolate all the time. That's my job, you know? So anyway, I thought it was a very effective, one of those things where one picture is worth more than 1,000 words.
Thank you, Casey. Karen or Erin, did y'all want to share what we talked about in our group? I thought that was elucidating.
Yes, so both Karen and I both reflected on how we saw that in our education systems, how it reminded us of our education systems. And you know, as kind of moving forward, and the ideal thing to do is try and break some of those barriers so that more progress can be made. But as you know, people are still kind of being brought up in that same kind of structure. It's interesting to think about how we can expect for that to happen in the future without having it like reflect back in the way people are brought up and educated throughout their careers.
Fantastic, thank you. Next up, thanks for sharing. We're now going to share this entire video from Waverly Claw with the Sonoran Institute. Please take some notes.
Welcome to Growing Water.
Oh, sorry, Sammy. Take some notes on the back side of your sheet if something comes up in your brain.
Smart, solving water concerns through silo busting and innovative land use. My name is Waverly Claw, Director of Resilient Communities and Watersheds at the Sonoran Institute, a nonprofit organization with a 30-year history of connecting people and communities with the natural resources that nourish and sustain them. So why are we here today? We're here to talk about how Colorado's water resources are threatened and what we can do together to address these water challenges. Let's go through some of the major issues facing our communities and ecosystems today. First, we don't have enough water to go around. There's a growing gap between water demand and water supply in Colorado, which will only grow if we see a hotter climate and continue our business as usual development patterns. Additionally, the Colorado River is part of a multi-state compact, and much of the Front Range gets its water from the Colorado River. If we are unable to deliver the water we are required to send through to Lake Powell, Colorado may see curtailments on our water. Second, extremely impactful natural hazards, including wildfire, drought, and flooding, are reducing water supply and degrading water quality and natural habitat in our watersheds. Next, stormwater management doesn't yet fully embrace low-impact development and green infrastructure, leading to increased treatment costs and decreased water quality in our creeks and rivers. Finally, consumers will bear higher costs of water as water scarcity increases and infrastructure ages, and may put a disproportionate amount of economic pressure on working-class families. But there are solutions to these challenges if we break down the silos between key stakeholders such as water providers, land use planners, and watershed organizations. First, a quick summary of roles and priorities. The developer or property owner who would like to build on or renovate her property. This person has a direct opportunity to utilize water-efficient and low-impact development design in their project. The land use planner or planning department has the role of leading long-range planning around what the community's vision and goals are. Planners update and implement the community's land development code and serve as the point of contact with applicants through the development review process. Water resource managers either housed in a municipality's water utility or a water provider that serves a particular geography, are responsible for delivering water to their customers and ensuring that water supply is available to meet the needs of future growth. Elected officials, like county commissioners and city council members, are empowered by the public to take a holistic and balanced view of community needs and priorities. Environmental or specifically focused water or watershed groups have missions around watershed or ecosystem health and often have a network of local or regional supporters who are passionate about environmental protection and restoration. Residents and the public care about the communities in which they live, as well as their own homes. They are balancing other priorities, including the desire for clean water, aesthetic desires, and cost or budget. These entities all play a role in decision-making around how much or what amount of water is used in a community and how water is treated throughout its cycle. The Growing Water Smart program brings these players together to address common challenges through collaboration and innovation. Here's the opportunity. Single communities or entire regions apply to join the workshop by identifying their biggest water challenges and forming a team of 5 to 10 key individuals representing stakeholders described earlier. They attend the workshop. During the workshop, they complete a community self-assessment to better understand current data and trends around water and existing plans and regulations that address water's demand, supply, quality, and community vision. These teams then determine opportunities for addressing their water challenges. There are lots of options for merging water issues into land use, which is the management and regulation of future or existing development. Here are some examples and ideas. Community vision and long-range planning. Does your community's comprehensive plan identify and address your community's vision and priorities around water? Do you have the data and projections that enable your community to make informed decisions around future development and growth? Landscaping. Taking aesthetic priorities around beautiful landscaping and incorporating water-wise principles such as using water-efficient irrigation, reducing turf grass, and promoting native drought-tolerant plants to reduce water use. Stormwater management and low-impact development to keep water on site during storms, which then doesn't overrun treatment plants or carry pollution and debris into creeks. Tiered water rates, which increase the cost of water as a customer goes beyond a tier or base level water budget. This incentivizes that customer to save money by conserving water. Promoting a compact urban form through density, clustering, and zoning can decrease per dwelling water use, while also creating open space that can be beneficial for habitat, human recreation and well-being, and stormwater infiltration. These are just a handful of the land use related strategies that can be deployed by working across sectors and breaking down silos to achieve your community's desired goals around water. The big questions for you are, what are your community's challenges? Are you breaking down silos and engaging the stakeholders to develop solutions? If you think some of these strategies may help your community solve your water challenges, form a team and apply to the next Growing Water Smart workshop to receive training, facilitated work sessions with your team, and the opportunity to apply for follow-up technical assistance. For more information, see growingwatersmart.org.
Great. So we just saw our first featured video from the virtual library. We just saw that full picture. I have some crucial questions that I came up with in my own brain based on this video. If you think I'm asking the wrong questions and you want to answer a different question, feel free to do that in your breakout rooms. So in the chat, if I can find it, I'm going to put your 3 crucial questions that I identified at least. Chat. To everyone. You can take these questions into your breakout rooms. They'll stay with you. Number 1, have you heard of the gap between water supply and water demand before? What are actions that you and your neighbors can implement to address the gap? What are some larger issues in the water supply demand gap that you need governmental help from? Anything else that's too big for our country to handle? What do we need from people globally? You can jot yourself some notes for question number 1 right now. You have 10 seconds. Number 2, what does low impact development and green infrastructure mean to you? You have 5 seconds. Question number 3. If you were to self-assess your watershed as water smart, what water issues would you seek to solve with your team? What are your ideal goals related to population growth, water demands, natural hazards, and future land use? All right, let's give you 5 more seconds on that. Solving the world's problems just tonight in a 45-minute session. So we're about to break you out into most likely those same rooms that you were with for the still image so that you can discuss with the same people again. If you happen to be with new people, okay, that works too. So get ready for breakout rooms.
You know, help foot the bill. I think if I came to my landlord and said, hey, I'll pay for the droughtscaping, then that's a different conversation. So kind of more programs to help facilitate. I'm sure there's a million similar like hurdles for each possible solution that I guess programs could help mitigate or break down some of those barriers.
Yeah, Karen, you're reminding me of like in Denver, we have to have green lawns. It's required by the city of Denver to have a green lawn. And if it's more brown than green, then you're in trouble. And it's like, we're in a semi-arid state. Why is that the rule of thumb?
And in California, there's a great podcast called Lawn and Order. I think it was from 99% Design or something like that. But they ticket you if you're watering your lawn in certain counties because water use is such a top priority, and conserving water is what they've identified as their top priority. So kind of switching that, we see that it can happen in certain communities, but how do we take the steps to kind of push our communities to that kind of tipping point?
Right. I wonder if it comes from like civilians, citizens from the ground up, or if it comes from the top down implementing measures on citizens.
Both.
Both.
In Boulder, I was on their water board for a while, and it was very much top down in the city where it came. But the cities hire consultants, and so they really know, if they're interested to find out, they find out those best practices really easily, and they can implement things like that. But I think it's so interesting to hear that Denver has that green lawn requirement, because they're also one of the very most progressive cities. So it's interesting to see that they have this menu of measures that they could select from, and then there's some that just go, no, that's not it for us. So that's an interesting thing.
I think it brings up the silos, right? Because like city ordinances around land use say we want green lawns, and then water smart technology and Denver Water, I read all their pamphlets and it's like water for 9 minutes, let it soak, water for 9 minutes. And then there's still people who are watering for 30 minutes and gathering pools of water in the street. But at least Denver Water has this idea that it's trying to move forward and get people to water their lawns less. Oh my gosh, y'all, those crucial conversations are coming out. That is the purpose of this activity, and I'm really excited to hear this share out. So we've brought the group back together and we're gonna do a share out. I left 8 room. Oh, we're supposed to end at 4:30. Oh no. Okay, let's do a share out for this video. So maybe some new voices, anyone?
I would share, we had a good conversation in our room. We didn't even get past the first question because there's so much to talk about there. But I think the biggest thing that we identified is that, like, yes, we get that there's a gap between supply and demand, and the issue or the way to solve it is really difficult. I mean, people ultimately are going to have to make really big changes, really, maybe sacrifices, and that's just really hard. It's a big conversation, and it's also really important for what we talked about, like that. When there's not enough water, that can really have make changes to the social fabric of culture potentially, and with all the changes that might have to come through, like you might have to. Well, Tom mentioned that there are some folks in the Navajo reservations who just simply don't even have enough water right now to do like appropriate hand washing for COVID, for example, and like that's kind of an extreme example, but when you don't have enough water, it causes a lot of stress in maybe unpredictable ways.
Thank you, Ray. So insightful. Let's hear some more like that.
Well, in our group, we ended up kind of taking off from some of the questions and, thinking about, this kind of, not so much as like, there's a uniform demand for water and, that amount goes less and then but sort of more along the lines of, of adaptation and some of the different places that adaptation can come. And not only in terms of adapting to water scarcity, but things like wildfire risk, maybe clustering, clustering development into more defensible spaces and then, with agriculture, which is of course the biggest draw on water, some people might not be able to keep farming depending on where they're at and what their water infrastructure situation is. And, other folks might just, end up having to grow different kinds of crops. So that's kind of where we wandered around a little bit.
Great. Thank you, Hannah Holm. Yeah, some of those big natural disasters might be those ones that we don't feel we can personally address. Another voice.
I wonder what the value of water, if you could put it, take it out of the sort of capitalist realm and put a value on, what the actual value of it would be, and yet still express it in dollars somehow. And could you solve it with like it's already a quota-based system, but is it solvable in some form if there were like a set price that were, purchasable? Could the West buy that water back, for example, from the Front Range? I wonder. I don't know if anybody wants to address that.
Well, I think it's a good question, and I just want to express appreciation to Mallory for giving us 20 seconds of warning for those 3 questions collectively to solve issues that have flummoxed state policy leaders for almost 100 years now. So just, Mallory, you could, put us all in a room and give us 20 seconds, and I like it. So
thank you, Chuck.
that constant interface between the prior appropriations ruling and doctrine and the subsequent local control emphasis and focus in Colorado's governance structure on what is truly a resource that simply is not defined by prior appropriations or boundaries or local control, leads to a whole industry and a whole lot of complex policy issues. If we'd have had 1 minute and 20 seconds, I think our group could have got there.
I think we're almost there.
Hey, Chuck, the conference planners wanted to give you 10 seconds, but Mallory fought really hard for 20. So consider yourself lucky.
I am blessed. I know that I'm blessed.
Yes, and thank you, Adam, for your unique perspective. What else do we have? What else is out there? How about number 3? Self-assessing your community. What issues do you see that need to be solved? What are your ideal goals? Maybe no one got that far, but.
Hey, Mallory, I'll jump in on that one. We talked about it a little bit, and Hannah already started that conversation. But we talked about a need to have more local planning departments at county and city levels involved in what folks are doing at this conference, because we really are a state that makes most of its decisions locally. And if we ignore those planners, we're going to continue to put people in high hazard areas that have better uses. That's how I look at it. And then I'll say, yeah, we didn't have a whole lot of time for any of this, but if we were in Avon, I would be chatting with Hannah and Jackie. So it was very nice to be put in a room with them. So I felt some semblance of normalcy about this conference in my little breakout group. So thank you so much for that.
Great. And we would take this conversation into the sunset because they're the big world problems, the issues that need to be solved. I'm happy to hear another thought, another opinion, burning questions.
I'll share, Mallory, about my hopes for my small local watershed. I live in Northeast Denver, near the confluence of Westerly Creek and Sand Creek, and it's very urban, industrial. The former Stapleton Airport was here, and there's still a lot of that kind of refuse, if you will, big concrete slabs in the river that are something from the airport. It's the water quality is not amazing, but it's still an amenity, and it's an amenity that I cherish living here in an urban environment. I've spent the last 14 years running trails around this neighborhood, which always includes a little jaunt along Sand Creek and seeing, the wildlife that are there and the little bit of habitat that it provides. And so I definitely have an appreciation for the Greenway, and I'm blanking on the name of it right now, Watershed group that works to improve, the Sand Creek.
Sand Creek Regional Greenway, yeah.
That works to improve that waterway. And but yeah, I think the community connection is really critical. So I'm thinking back on a session that I just moderated right before this, and we talked about funding, and we talked about the legal aspects and policy, and we talked about the social connections, and those all being real components that when you have concerned community members that have a passion for their rivers, and Jeff Shoemaker talked about that passion component, and it brought him to tears looking back at what the South Platte River means to so many people in a really urban community. Like, our waterways are just our lifeblood. And so I think we just need to keep inviting more people to make those connections, and that's gonna help be a driver for the systemic change that I think we're all trying to make. And I'll just add, that's something that Steve Mailer's brought up in our group. And to echo what you said, Chris, I really appreciated getting to talk to my little room. But Steve brought up just the need to think more systemically, and that is a challenge. So going back to the initial diagram, that compartmentalization of how we approach solutions. So I liked that vision of how to look more at a system level change.
Thank you so much for the feedback from your group. My major drive in this discussion was to acknowledge the difficult job that our state and basin planners have to balance with the various water uses. And I'm so thankful to have spent time with y'all today and hear your knowledge and opinions and questions. You can see this video again, along with submissions from like half of the people in this room, in our virtual library. I linked it over in the chat earlier in the discussion, so head on over to our virtual library and you can see similar presentations that get your brain and imagination going really well. I wanted to mention specifically Mark Beardsley on patience and patience. It was just simply too long for this activity, but it hit the nail on the head for our theme, business as unusual. So check that out. And please take a look at Paul Landau's poster about voluntary water management program, see what crucial questions he's asking and tackling to answer with his research. So I really appreciate all of these submissions that came through the virtual library. Please go take a look. A lot of the folks in participating in this were the submitters. So we appreciate y'all taking the time and spending brain energy at the end of this day. So let's get together again tomorrow morning and groove. So I hope you'll join me again for the dance class tomorrow morning. It starts at 9 a.m. And please enjoy the rest of your evening.
Hey, Mallory, is there a dress code for tomorrow's dance class? I mean, coat and tails, are we talking, or is this more like Zumba stuff?
This is stretchy pants.
Okay.
Stretchy pants.
And hey, if you're over into the library, scroll all the way to the bottom. If you're interested in the Gold King mine spill, my video is 45 minutes. You know, when you're after this session, crack a beer and watch something, you know, about Southwest Colorado.
That's
Hey, Mallory, how many of these submissions did we get?
We got about 20, so very impressive.
I just want to say thank you, because it was hard every year to pick but we usually get to pick like 30 talks because we get 3 tracks, and that is anguishing. And to have to make it 8 or 10 this year almost killed us. So I'm so glad you guys still came forward. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Mallory, before we all get off, can I take a quick photo screenshot so we have a conference photo? If everyone can smile or wave or do something in the screen, I'll get you.
Yay!
Hey Jayla, will you draw me in later? My camera just gave up on me.
Awesome. Thanks, you guys.
Yay! We'll see you all
Bye.
tomorrow. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Night.
Thanks, Mallory.
Thanks so much. Have a great evening.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mallory. That was great.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you so
Great.
much.
Great job, Mallory. Thanks.